Over the last decade, I've had the great privilege of listening to the deepest, darkest secrets of hundreds and hundreds of people. And I'm truly honored and grateful to have had this opportunity to work so closely with the hearts and minds of these amazing, inspirational people. And I feel that this has afforded me a certain insight into humanity and the human condition. And what I want to share with you today is one of those insights. And the insight came to me recently. It was only a few months ago. I was sitting on my porch at home in Launceston. The sun was shining down on me. I was doing up my shoelace. And I just had this flash. And the flash was that catching a glimpse of who you really are and who you're meant to be is a simple yet powerful and effective way to move through fear into a place where you can actually start living the life you're meant to live. A glimpse by its very nature is a flash, a shimmer, a momentary impression that can last a lifetime. My intention today is to inspire you to catch a glimpse of the best version of yourself so you can start living more of the life that you're really meant to live. Standing before you today, I would like to say it's a pleasure, but really, it's actually not. In fact, this is one of the most terrifying things that I've ever done. Auditioning for this TED Talk, and then rehearsing for this TED Talk, and then walking out on the stage today for this TED Talk has been absolutely excruciating. And I have a confession to make. It's turned me into a crazed lunatic at times, mostly in the comfort of my own home, where I've felt anxiety and fear about what I'm doing today, and I will just head directly to the pantry to find any source of food that will suppress that terrible feeling in my stomach. Often I seek out chocolate, but when we don't have chocolate available, if cooking chocolate is there, that will do. And I will have the whole bar. And other times, when I'm feeling that anxiety and fear in my stomach, and I notice that the dishwasher is not being stacked perfectly the way that I like it to be stacked, I go off my head and turn into a banshee. So I'm sorry to my family for you having to put up with this crazy woman for this period of time. It's almost over. So yes, fear is a very funny thing, isn't it? We all have it. It's part of the human condition. But different things make us afraid. I'm a 44-year-old woman. I'm a mother, a stepmother, a partner. I'm a business owner. I'm a performance and well-being coach. And I've actually done public speaking all through my life, even as a child. And yes, I've always had those speaking nerves before I've walked onto the stage to say whatever I need to say. And I usually feel that they actually just help me speak better and get into the zone. They've never been anything quite like what I've experienced with the TED Talk. Now, why is that? Because I see TED as such an amazing, impactful source of inspiration. And my personal mission and driving force has always been to create more positive change within myself and even in a little way with the world. And I'm super aware that standing before you delivering a TED Talk is perhaps one of the most powerful and impactful ways that I could go about achieving my purpose. So how did I get here today? Well, that's a great question. Firstly, I acknowledge the fear, like I'm doing with you now, which helps the fear dissolve. But secondly, and probably even more importantly, I deliberately caught a glimpse of myself, standing on the TEDx stage, speaking words from my heart, feeling inspired in the talk that I was delivering. And guess what? It was good. So here I am. I want to talk to you now about what I believe to be a modern day tragedy. And how I'd like to speak to you about this is actually get you to answer some questions. So if you're comfortable to, now's a great time just to close your eyes and consider the questions. Up to you though. So the first question I want to ask you is, when is the last time that you felt afraid? And I don't just mean scared, I mean deeply, sick in the stomach, eat a bar of chocolate, afraid. And I bet that you can recall a time or several times when you felt that level of fear. Now the next question that I want to ask you is completely different. In this moment, right here, right now, can you glimpse your own special kind of amazingness? Can you see your own unique quality of awesomeness? And I bet your answer to this question is no, or I'm not sure. And I mean the majority of you. There hopefully are some people out there that can see that. But this to me is the modern day tragedy, and this is what I've witnessed with these hundreds of people that I've worked with. That so many of us can't actually see our own amazingness. We may be able to see it in other people quite easily, and often we do. People that we love or people that we might just meet, we can see their amazingness. But it's strange we don't apply that same principle to ourselves. Now, why is this? I believe it's because of one thing primarily, and that one thing is the F word, fear. Not that other F word that you might have thought of when I said that, but a much bigger, a much worse F word, fear. So fear of what? Fear of standing up and doing something we really feel driven to do, but failing. Fear of being knocked down or judged. Fear of just basically feeling like we've done something that's not right or not looked upon well. And that fear drives us away and prevents us from actually stepping forward and doing what we most want to do. And it's interesting when you look at children and fear, and then adults and fear. And as a child, children are fearless. And we see that if we have children or children in our lives, and we might recall that with ourselves. As children, we're willing to do whatever's out there that looks interesting and fun. We'll just go do it. We'll give it a go. It doesn't matter if we do it well or not. It's if we enjoy it. And then even by the tender age of 4 or 5 years old, we start to develop a sense of, ooh, I might not have done that very well. Maybe I better be careful before I try that again, or before I do something else new. And I believe that through our lives, we progressively get more and more fearful and less comfortable and willing to take those risks, to try the new things, or to try the things that our heart tells us we really want to do. And I think this leads us to a tension. And I think the tension is about learning to play it safe. So as we get older, we become more equipped, and not equipped, but more about playing it safe. We prefer that choice. Yet deep inside, we still yearn to shine. And that yearning to shine started out when we were a little kid, and it never goes away. We can't squash it down. But the playing it safe might win out. So my question is, how do we make sure that that yearning to shine wins out? Well, what I want to suggest to you today, that catching a glimpse of our own amazingness is the way, it's the doorway to doing that, to breaking through that fear and to being all that we can be. Now, it's one thing to understand logically that a glimpse of who you really are and who you're meant to be can allow you to do that. But it's another thing to actually carry that out in your life. And what I want to talk to you about today is an approach that I've used with myself and a number of clients that I feel is quite effective. And it's a two-step approach. I'll say it's simple. It's not always easy, though. But I'd say it's simple. And there's 2 steps. And we're going to start with a new F word. So get rid of the fear. And we're going to talk about the feel. So feeling for real. That is a big and important step to get to this place when you can really see who you are. I ask you, how can you actually know who you really are and what you want if you're disconnected from how you really feel? Again, going back to kids have raw emotions. They just flow out all over the place. One minute they might be joyful, the next minute they might be in tears, the next minute they might be yelling at you, and the next minute they might be joyful again. It can all happen in a period of 5 minutes because emotions just roll through them. That's actually how we're meant to experience emotion. But as we get older, of course, that changes, and we need to be more appropriate in certain environments. We need to contain our emotions, and that's all okay as long as we don't contain them always. Those emotions need to be expressed. Emotion is actually derived from the words energy in motion. And it's energy that's meant to move through us. It's meant to pass through us. And if we contain it, it will come bursting out at the most inopportune times. And I'm sure you've all had that experience when you spill coffee and you go off your head or you burst into tears, really inappropriate reaction to the event. And that's because you've contained your emotion. So I'm going to give you an example of a number of clients that I worked with to illustrate this, the importance of really feeling. And we'll call this client John. And John came to see me under the guise of wanting to find more direction in his life. And very quickly in the first session, we worked out that that actually wasn't the real issue. The real issue in his life was that he was grieving. He had tragically lost his wife, and he had 2 daughters that he was bringing up on his own. And he had a lot of grief around that, as you can imagine. So we started to talk about the emotions that he'd experienced around processing the grief. And very quickly and easily he could talk about the anger, the irritation, and the guilt around that. And he was able to express those emotions quite comfortably. But then when we moved to sadness, well, that was another thing altogether. And he actually said to me, and this is not uncommon for people to say this, he said, "I don't do sadness." And I said, "Really?" And we both kind of laughed. You know, it was just so ludicrous sounding, but it actually was his real experience, and we needed to honor and respect that. So we talked a lot about the sadness and the purpose of sadness and why we need it to move through us. And I said, what would be the worst thing that would happen if you allowed yourself to be sad about your wife dying? And he was sort of sat back and thought about it. And he said, I don't know, I guess I could just start sobbing uncontrollably and it would never stop. And that's a common fear that we can have about emotional expression, that we're out of control and it will never end. And I said, you're probably right. You'll feel out of control. I've sobbed in that deep way several times, and you do feel out of control, but it passes. And then you can recover, and then you can move on. But there was still a lot of fear for him around it. So what we did was we worked on him catching a glimpse of where he really wanted to head in his life. Where did he want to see himself in a year's time? And right away, almost instantly, like that glimpse quality I talked about earlier, he wanted to be the ideal dad for his daughters. He wanted to be emotionally present and connected with his children so he could role model that for them. They could process their grief and grow up to be all that they're meant to be. And that glimpse was what allowed him to walk through the fear and to actually experience that sadness. And he did go away in his own time, in his own way, privately, and express the sadness, the deep, guttural sobbing. And he shared it with me later. And it was hard and scary, and it was out of control for a while, but then it stopped, and he was exhausted, and he slept to recover, but he felt better. And he continued to allow himself to do that as he felt he needed to. And John is still heading down this path today of being the best dad that he can be. And he's emotionally present and available for his daughters, which is one of the greatest gifts that he can give to them. And that was because he allowed himself to see this glimpse and then to feel for real. So let's move on to another F word. And this F word is focus. So remember I said there's 2 steps. The first is feeling for real, and the second is focus. And what do I mean by focus? What we focus on grows. You've heard that phrase that your perception is your reality. So what you focus on is what you predominantly perceive, and that's what becomes real for you in your life. And it's sort of like a snowball. And it's really a simple concept, but very powerful when you actually apply that to your life. So checking what your focus is in the first place is really critical to catch a glimpse of who you really are. Because if your focus, for example, is on everyone else and not on yourself, it's a pretty effective way of avoiding working on who you are and being all that you can be. So the first step is to actually make sure you have some focus on yourself. The second step is to work out what you're actually working towards, which tends to be your focus. And again, I'm going to use a combination of clients as an example to illustrate this point of focus here. And we'll call this client Samantha. Samantha came to see me and was at an interesting point in her life when she had climbed the corporate ladder quite successfully, was at a very high level, had always envisaged that that's what she would do. She worked very hard to get to that high level. She had a family and a partner and was very happy with them, but something was missing. She just knew that something wasn't quite right. She could feel it. And so we talked about that, and we worked out what had been her plan, her focus through her life, and it was to climb the corporate ladder, as I said. And we wanted to understand why. that was her definition of success that she had learned from a young age and just basically continued to follow down that path. And she truly believed that when she reached the heights of the corporate ladder, she would have all happiness and all fulfillment, which a lot of us may have experienced. But the reality was that wasn't happening for her. She also found that she was trying very hard to prove herself by climbing the corporate ladder. It was about, in part, that she felt she wasn't quite good enough. And each time she got to a higher level, she thought that meant, I'm better. But she didn't feel better, so she kept climbing. So it was quite a vicious cycle, and she really was starting to become aware of this. So when we worked this out, we started to look at who she really was and what her unique strengths and talents were. And one of the hardest questions that I find for clients to answer is, what are your unique strengths and talents? And typical answers are, I don't have any, or I don't know, or honesty, reliability, punctuality. You know, just really rote stuff that doesn't actually give you a true insight into that person. But ask someone what their weaknesses are, or areas for improvement, and roll out a list and give me a couple hours. It's amazing the difference. And that in itself can tell you the focus that people have in their lives. And that was the case with Samantha. She was very quick to talk about all the things she needed to improve and could improve and was improving, and add things to the list, but it really was hard for her to work on, to describe her strengths. So we shifted her focus to strengths, and we went through a number of activities to help her uncover her true unique strengths and talents, which we all have. She went out speaking to people in her life that knew her well and asked them, hey, what do you see are my unique strengths and talents? And she collected a lot of data through that. She also thought about people that inspired her, and those people, what particular qualities were inspirational to her. And that also helped her uncover who she really was, what she was drawn to, and what she resonated with. And basically we worked out that her key strengths and talents were around communication, around connecting with people. She was highly intelligent. She was a very kind and compassionate person. She really loved learning and development, both for herself, but in others. And she was a natural leader. And as she climbed up the corporate ladder, she got further away from being able to lead a group of people, where she was able to do that in other positions lower down on the ladder. So ultimately, Samantha made a very brave decision. And she went to her boss and said, I want to actually stop working in this position, and I want to step down into another level of the organization, a lower level, where I can actually have a team of people again and start working with them, because that's what I love doing, and that's where I feel my strengths lie. And it didn't happen right away, but over a period of a few months, she did actually move into a new role. And she was much happier. And she continues to be to this day. So that's a bit about focus. Just to recap the 2 steps that I'm suggesting to catch a glimpse of who you really are and who you want to be are to feel for real and to check your focus, and through that work out who you really are. And to recap from me, I mentioned when I walked in here early on that I was experiencing an F word of fear, and I've talked to you about catching a glimpse and being on stage as I am today. And now, nearing the end of my talk, I'm experiencing a new F word feeling, which is fabulous, fantastic. It's an amazing feeling. I want to close just by sharing with you a visualization that resonates with me about this whole process of catching a glimpse. And I just want you to imagine that you're looking down a blackened tunnel, and you can see nothing, it's completely black. But you can reach to the farthest end of the tunnel, and you can scrape back some of that blackness just to a point that a pinhole of light shines through. You can start to see that light. And then you continue to scrape back that light until you have a screen before you. And on that screen is you, living the life that you're meant to live. Fulfilled, happy, joyful, many moments each day. And working from a place of your unique strengths and talents. And by the very fact that you're working from a place of your unique strengths and talents, you're making a positive impact on the world. And right away, the fear, it's gone, it's dissolved, it drops away. And that glimpse of the best version of yourself becomes your driving force. Thank you very much.